Governance and event discovery are essential when implementing an event-driven architecture. Today, we're getting straight into the details, breaking it all down for you. Let's get started.
Welcome to Talking Event Driven, the podcast about the world of event-driven architecture. You will hear seasoned professionals sharing invaluable insights about their challenges and experiences in event-driven architecture.
Today, I've got a well-known guest lined up, David Boyne. He's a developer advocate, speaker, creator of Event Catalog, and, dare I say it, also passionate about event-driven systems. David, welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kris. Yeah, thanks for inviting me here. It's awesome to be here and speaking to you. So I appreciate the intro.
Yeah, great to have you here. Let's jump to our first question we have for you. David, you're very well known in the event-driven architecture space. And I actually first came across your work through the EDA visuals document, which is packed with super helpful visuals and notes. We use it a lot for documentation also.
Nice.
So it's clear that you've got a deep knowledge of event-driven architecture. How did you first get into EDA, and what sparked your passion for it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was thinking about this actually. Where did it all start? I think I kind of been building systems and as engineers for like 15 plus years or whatever now. But actually, if I take it all the way back, it's actually I started as a front-end developer, believe it or not. And it's quite funny when you think about event-drivens, you think about messages, you think about webhooks, you think about pub sub patterns. There's like lots of this in the front-end ecosystem, like clicking on buttons and doing this. And then as frameworks were coming out like years ago, like Knockout.js, for those that can remember any of that. And React come out, and then things like Redux come out. I was big on Redux. And when you look at the patterns underneath these frameworks, they're all event-driven in theory. I didn't really know it at the time, but like especially Redux, you have an event store, you play some actions, you store some state, and you can replay the state. It sounds like event sourcing, really. I think that's kind of where it comes from. But I didn't really know it at the time, so I've always had this like mindset of that. And then I worked at various enterprises for years doing usual stuff, Dockerized containers when Docker come out, and that was a big thing, and microservices, this was a big thing, all REST based, all this based, and that's what we did, and that was kind of the industry standard, especially where I was working anyway. And then I left this company after 8 years, big company in the UK. Went to join a startup, and I remember reading at the time as the serverless stuff was kicking off, right? Like AWS serverless. What does all this mean? Like compute Lambda, what's Lambda, and all this weird and wonderful things happening. So I decided in a startup, I had a greenfield project. Yeah, why not try this and use serverless and do some migration project? And part of that was actually using some of the AWS services, so things like SNS and SQS, or what is a message? Why do we need a queue? Why do we need resilient applications? What does all this mean? And then from there, it just spiraled for many years into like what is event-driven architectures and all this weird and wonderful stuff. And I remember at the time, someone was teaching me all of this. They were teaching me about SQS and SNS and messages. And as I mentioned, dead letter queues, idempotency. You step back I remember stepping back thinking, wow, this stuff's complicated. And then luckily for me, Amazon actually released something called EventBridge, which is one of my favorite services there. Amazon EventBridge is just like a managed message bus, really. It really allows you to publish an event on and like listen with downstream consumers. And this is managed for you. And that simplified the whole thing for me. And I was like, this is fantastic. Now I can actually understand what's happening. I'm going to publish a message, and then I'm going to actually listen downstream to do this. And I think the overall thing really sparked my interest and got me diving deep for the next 8 years after this. Was the business agility that I saw. It wasn't really the technical side of things, but more the business side of things. And I remember I remember being in these teams for many, many years, with product owners and stakeholders, and like tech always seems to be the bad person in the room. Like tech always seemed to be the thing slowing us down because we can't move fast enough because we have so much tech debt or whatever else and all this stuff. But I had this like glimpse of hope with event-driven architectures, which is like we create these decoupled systems. We're using messages to communicate between the boundaries. But I had these moments with a product owner where we'd ask for a new feature, but we would half the lead time to this feature because we already have the events there. We just piggyback off the events. We have this evolutionary architecture now. And for me, that was mind opening. That was like, wow, like why? I don't know. I just fascinated by that itself. So I decided to just continue down that path and continue diving deep, continue learning, continue sharing. I'm a big sharer of what I learn. And open source work. So I enjoy doing open source tooling around this whole ecosystem. And that's literally been it for the last 7 years. It's just diving deep, continue to dive deep, find problems, find solutions, who's doing what. And it's fascinating. So I still find it fascinating, to be honest. And so now I dedicate most of my time to this whole space, really.
Yeah, very interesting. So you developed some best practices there, and then after talking a lot with the business, you saw that event documentation is very important, obviously, and you created your own product, event catalog, which looks very nice, by the way. But
thanks.
What made you decide to start doing that?
Yeah, so when I was in the startup, if I continue the story, I guess, but I was in the startup and building this stuff, and then I was building tooling alongside this. So like EventBridge come out as an example, and it was missing some core features. So I was like, hey, why don't we just build this, open source it? And people were interested. But then I stumbled across async API, actually. Are you aware of this, the specification?
Not really, no.
So async API allows you to it's a fork
async,
of async. Sorry, it's probably the accent. Yeah, cool. So I stumbled across this just years ago, and then anyway, long story short, I ended up joining the team there. So I left the startup, joined Async API, focusing more on tooling around the specification and more around visualization, to be honest. And while I was there, I created event catalog. So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, like, specifications and tools are very much focused on technology, tech problems, which is fine. But there's a lot of other things around that, things like business context and context about your events and discoverability. This is the main problem that I saw and thought about, was if we have a team of 200, 300, 400 people, enterprise scale, how are people discovering events? Like, if the whole dream of event-driven architecture, in my opinion, is we have these events and messages that we can kind of piggyback off to and have this evolutionary architecture. But step one is finding them. And if you can't find them, then it's the whole problem. And so I kind of dived deeper into this issue, and I created event catalog, like version 1, 2 years ago, actually, 3 years ago now, I think. Just as hey, I think this is a problem. Like, here is something to help. And I kind of just parked it for 2 years. I went to work for Amazon 2 years after that. But over these 2 years, it just gained more and more traction. People coming out and saying, hey, we got this problem. Thanks for event catalog. Are you working on it anymore? And it's like, it's an open source project. Sure, feel free to do a pull request. I don't know. And that kept happening. So, event catalog just spawned from, I think that I don't know how people are solving discoverability problems. And here is a solution. I don't know if it's the right solution. And from that, it's just spiraled into what it is today, really.
That's really great, because in fact we also had problems with async API, and especially if you have like these edge cases, or it's not even edge cases, where you have nested avros or things like that. It becomes a problem with async API. So that's why we also use event catalog now, and we actually integrated in our infrastructure as code pipeline, where we generate the event catalog files together with applying the new schemas. Is that the way you also advise to use event catalog to keep it in line with what's deployed, basically?
Exactly, yeah. It's an interesting one with event catalogs. So it started as like a static site generator, and it still is at the end of the day. And the vision for the project is it's technology agnostic, right? So you could use it with Kafka, you could use it with AWS, Azure, Google, whatever. So at the end of the day, you get a static site from it, but the power of that at the moment is we can build this. You can build this as many times as you want. So we can add some automation to this. So the automation in your case is we have these schemas, we have this stuff happening day to day and all this kind of stuff. But Event Catalog has the power to, with generators, but even custom scripts, to go and pull this information down from somewhere. Event Catalog can also version this for you. So in this case, it's like, hey, I've got this Avro schema in this repo on a daily build. You know, whatever's good for you, or an hourly build. I can go and pull these down, and if there's a difference, I can now version these Avro schemas in Event Catalog. And the great thing about that, the vision really here is if we can automate a lot of this, which is, you know, you have this Avro schema, it's now changed. What has changed? We can add change logs in Event Catalog to be able to describe to people the changes, because this is context that's often lost between teams and companies, especially around governance. It's just helping people, you know, and I think one way you're doing it, a lot of Event Catalog users are doing it this way. It's like they automate builds off certain things, like GitHub Actions is one of them, but they have it in their CI/CD. They have some people are like triggering events to trigger a new build. It's literally whatever you want. Containerize the thing, host it somewhere, host it in S3. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, the flexibility is there. For sure. Yeah.
The fact that you can adapt it to your own environment, basically just the way you want. Yeah. If you look at the features you have, you recently added the visualizer, which is very nice. I think this is also going to evolve in the future, I can imagine. Is there anything other other big features that we can expect in the coming months, in the coming year?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So definitely more integrations. So at the moment, Event Catalog has Discord community of about 830 people at the moment. So I try and work backwards a lot from them. It's like, you know, what problems are you having? What integrations do you want? So example would be Backstage is up there. People are using Backstage to help them govern their systems and do all sorts of internal developer portals. But they want Event Catalog to live alongside that. So that's one integration. I think one thing is just to build up the integrations. There's 4 at the moment, soon 5. But there's tons of integrations. Like, what about Kafka? What about Flink? What about a Confluent? What about all these systems that can host your schemas, that can host documentation, that can do whatever? Like this, like Event Catalog can kind of pull these in. Other things, Event Catalog, you know, future ideas are things like, I'd love to be in the place where if Event Catalog knows your schemas and knows your domains on your services, things like notifying people of schema changes. Like, and that's one example.
Yeah.
I'm about to break someone. Like, Event Catalog knows who the consumers are, so just go tell them, right? Go tell them that a change is coming. Event Catalog could really understand if it's a breaking change. Breaking change is coming. You know, do you want to do this? So there is interesting things that can happen. But I think at the moment, the main focus at the moment is kind of stabilize the project, had more integrations. I have like problems at the moment with big catalogs. So I have users out there that document literally thousands of events, and the documentation tool wasn't really initially designed for that. What UX patterns can I put in place? More things around visualization. I'm a very visual person, as you probably know from the EDA visuals and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So visualization, people come to Event Catalog and they like the visuals, but they're very basic at the moment. It's very like boxes and, you know, this talks to this, but there's so much more we can do there. On top of that, what about tools on top of event catalog? You know, like, for example, when we event storm or we do event modeling and the design phase, I don't know, in my head, we have rooms and we have post-it notes and we have discussions, which is fantastic. But why can't we capture them in a tool? Why can't we capture them in something like event catalog, that you walk away from that meeting and now we have a catalog ready for us to go? Why can't the schemas generate code models for us in Rust or Go or anything? You know, it's connecting all these bits that we tend to do in event-driven architectures. And I think, should event catalog do them all? I'm not sure. Can it do them all? Probably, yeah. So I think I'm just kind of at the moment, as I mentioned, sailing, just figuring it out with the community, figuring it out with the problems out there, and that's it, you know. And equally also is trying to make the project sustainable is the hard thing, because it's open source and it will remain open source. So, you know, how do you make that sustainable so I can focus on that full time? So that's something I'm trying to figure out in the next 6 months too.
Yeah, I can imagine. You basically quit your job and went full in for event catalog. How is that going for you? Do you still like your decision? Is it a struggle sometimes? I can imagine it is, but do you?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, so I left AWS in, I think, May or June. So things were happening at AWS. You know, some of my team were moving on, and I had to think about what I wanted to do next. And I enjoy open source work. I enjoy giving. I don't know. I just enjoy giving back. I enjoy this kind of stuff. So from a motivation point of view, you know, that's there. But yeah, it's challenging at times. You know, you're on your own. You're kind of in this ether. But as I mentioned, the community there's a strong community around event catalog that kind of keep the project going. A couple of contributors, like core contributors, are coming out, which is fantastic. It's awesome to see, you know, people around the world just adding pull requests and making this thing better. But yeah, it's as I mentioned, the challenge at the moment is just sustaining it. I think it's possible. At the moment, the plugins, the generators are dual license. It's something I'm experimenting with, which means if you want some of the automation that I've been building, pay a license. Like it's like a small fee a year, and that helps keep the project sustainable. But equally, something I'm going to be looking at too is like consulting. But the ultimate, I think, vision really is just to get into the companies that have this governance problem and these issues and things, and help solve that for them, but equally bring that learning back into the product and then keep that cycle going. So I'm hoping that would also pay for the time. But it's something completely new to me. I've never done this before. It's scary. You know, it's scary leaving a job, you know, especially at AWS, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. But I feel it's the right thing to do. I feel like I've got event catalog. You know, I started it in June, July, like more on a full-time focus. But equally, it feels like we're just getting started. There's so much to do, and it's unbelievable. So, you know, one thing I'm kind of exploring too, but I don't know because it's a fork in the path. But is like event catalog in theory could also get funding, you know, and actually build a team around it and actually make it, put the gas on and make it a product, even make it a SaaS product. And that's because, as I mentioned, there's so much more you can do with this thing, and so much value I believe it can provide. So yeah, at the moment it's just feet on the ground, figuring it out, trying to navigate it, and just headspace is what I'm trying to get, and focus on the project, making it mature enough. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway, if we look at it, at the progress you made last year, it's quite impressive. So definitely doing the right thing. I also think that what you just mentioned, the focus more maybe on services and governance at customers. That's basically what we do at Simo. So I think it's a good idea, because when we do projects, we often get, of course, feedback from the customer, and okay, we need the documentation, but we also need to visualize the processes. And I mentioned this before also, about the visualization, that it would be interesting to get indeed this information from Confluent or from Flink, or get this real-time information into the documentation to see, okay, what is going on, because you can define your consumers of the events, but still you're not sure if this is complete, if this is the full picture. If you can get this information from a real-time system and you can see, okay, these events are flowing in this way, that's something that customers are also asking for. So definitely happy to help you there with the governance part, and then also give you some feedback on these new features.
Sure. Yeah, for sure, definitely. Yeah, anything that can kind of help. But I think you're totally right. I always had this vision, especially when I was kind of building these systems. It's like I don't know what it is, but I'd like to walk into a company or a dashboard or something and visualize the events happening, visualizing a system. Like, I don't know what it is, but I kind of have that thought of, can I walk into an office and like see on a dashboard like what is happening right now in these boxes and these events and these messages. It's like, and I think with OTel and telemetry and things like becoming standardized now, I think these things are more possible. Yeah, that helps with tracing. I think there is definitely more to be done, especially that if I can step into if I can lift the carb on it and see what's happening in the system in real time, and see the events, it's like, I don't know. To me, that's kind of magical, really.
That would be magical indeed. That's also the starting point when you talk with your business. You're on a whiteboard, or you're doing event storming, and you're making a visualization of the business process, things they understand. And if you can give that same visualization from your real-time system, and you can talk about that and extend the system, it would also be a big gain. Yeah, definitely.
I think exactly that. It's interesting with Event Catalog, actually, is what I found. What I'm finding with a lot of people is Event Catalog is serving multiple personas, and you kind of just mentioned it there, which is it bridges the gap between technical and the business. And we have events. An event is important to the organization. An event, a domain event, or whatever it is. That the order has been placed or whatever. It's not just a technical implementation. It's that there is value to everyone. But an Avro schema specification or breaking changes might be only important to the developer or the architect, right? And I think this could be something Event Catalog may go to in the future, is like, could we have different views on the same data based on who you are and who's looking at this? Like, I'm not interested in schemas, but I am interested in flow. I'm interested in features. I'm interested in events. I'm interested in when a user signs up and pays, like what events are being fired along that x-axis. So huge value. There's just pockets of value everywhere. So it's just trying to focus and bring that out to people and make that accessible.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's clear that this tooling around event-driven architecture will expand a lot in the next coming years. I can imagine it's still a lot that is missing, and everybody is noticing that. I think they see the value, but it's not like you had with a database before, where you have a lot of tooling around it. There's still some missing pieces there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think one thing I often say to people, so the sun has literally come out and blinding me. You can probably see that.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah. But one thing I say to a lot of people is it's interesting. The tooling and the specifications and the standards all seem to be emerging, and when you compare it to like a API REST based system, we've been building REST. We've been building message systems for decades. Don't get me wrong, because you can actually literally go back to white papers decades ago. But we always seem to focus a lot on this REST. We've got Swagger specs or Open API specs. If you go into any organization, you try and create an API. I can imagine you've got to go jump through loads of hoops around schema design and all this kind of weird and wonderful stuff, which is fantastic because it's kind of like evolved to that point where people are aware of this and people have learned the hard way, I guess. But with event architectures and events and schemas and all this stuff, it seems like we're 5-6 years in the past compared to that. It feels like it's the same. It's almost the same kind of stuff. But as you mentioned, the tooling is lacking. Debugging's lacking. Even I think the education in places is lacking. What is a schema? What does a schema mean of an event? Why do we care about that? Why should we do event first thinking and schemas up front? And because it's so easy, I think the barrier to EDA is lowering, which is fantastic because we have services helping us. But it's so easy just to put an event onto Kafka, let's say, or put an event onto a different channel or broker without necessarily thinking about, I guess, the consequences of that, or how do you mature this event over time, or is there too much implementation details in the event? I don't know, and it just spirals into this chaos that you see 2-3 years down the line.
It's definitely evolved from maybe a technical interest that was there like 5 years ago. Kafka was often used by some developers because they like the implementation, but then they just start using it and they don't think indeed about a good schema design, about topic naming conventions, about domain-driven design, basically. So all these things are very important. And now when we start a project, we always start with that and talk with the business. Okay, see where are the boundaries, how do your domain objects look like, how can we map events, what is going to be the naming conventions and all these things. And that of course makes sure that the data which is on your Kafka is structured in a way that is usable in the future, and that is and you can apply versioning. And of course you can also have an event catalog which can visualize everything in a nice way because the data is structured in a nice way. So, that's definitely important. Okay, very interesting stuff. I think we have to wrap up now. Anyway, thanks a lot, David, for sharing your thoughts here on our podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Yeah, feel free to ping, or if anyone's listening, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. Happy to answer questions or just connect in general. So thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, great. Okay. Bye-bye. See you.
Cool. Bye-bye. See you, Kris.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talking Event Driven. We hope you enjoyed the insights and stories shared by our incredible guests as much as we did. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Stay tuned for more enlightening conversations. Until next time, keep innovating and stay event-driven.